From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate-level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Award of the Year and the Best Education Show for 2017. I'm producer and host John Letts. Ramping Up Your English is an instructional support program for intermediate-level English learners. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and you want to reach higher levels of English proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs and get closer to your goal. Ramping Up Your English is for English learners from all language backgrounds and for people from all ages. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is Native Americans. This is segment 1 of episode 81. In our last episode, we learned about the peopling of America, the first Americans who crossed over the Bering Land Bridge. It's a pretty awesome thing to ponder, for these were people who were the first to truly discover America. For fans of the TV show Star Trek, they were the ones to boldly go where no man had gone before. Well, I'm sure survival was a struggle, and I don't want to minimize that struggle, but these first Americans had the singular experience of settling areas that had never been settled by people. I can't imagine an adventure that would equal. When we finished episode 80, I related some of the creation myth of the Cherokee people. We left off with the great buzzard crafting the mountains that would characterize the homeland of the Cherokee people. I also stated that in the study of Native Americans, we would encounter many stories many stories is what I should say, and there are always advantages to listening to everyone's stories. But we should also ask ourselves some questions. Who is telling the story? I acquired the Cherokee creation story from a book entitled The Portable North American Indian Reader by Frederick W. Turner III. He kind of sounds like a professor. Well, he's a professor of folklore whose stated purpose is to bring to the general reader the traditions and historical realities of the American Indian. I told the story word for word as it was in here, except I didn't try pronouncing the native words that were used to name the characters. Now, in this sense, I invested a great deal of trust in the story's authenticity. After the question of who is telling the story, the next important question is why are they telling it? What purposes are they trying to achieve? This question is critical. This story seems to be told to explain the creation of the Cherokee people and how their world was created. The questions of who and why will be asked repeatedly as we explore the Native American people of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Let's share a little bit more of this Cherokee creation story. So here we go. When the earth was dry and the animals came down, it was still dark. So they got the sun and set it in a track to go every day across the island from east to west, just overhead. It was too hot this way. And the red crawfish had his shell scorched a bright red so that his meat was spoiled, and the Cherokee do not eat it. The conjurers put the sun another handbreadth higher in the air, but it still was too hot. They raised it another time and another until it was 7 handbreadths high and just under the sky arch. Then it was right, and they left it so. And this is why conjurers call this place the 7th height, because it is 7 handbreadths above the earth. Every day the sun goes along under this arch and returns at night to the upper side, to the starting place. Now there is another world under this, and it is like ours in everything, animals, plants, and people, save that the seasons are different. The streams that come down from the mountains are the trails by which we reach this underworld, and the springs at their heads are the doorways by which we enter it. But to do this, one must fast and go to the water and have one of the underground people for a guide. We know that the seasons in the underworld are different from ours because the water in the springs is always warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer than the outer air. When the animals and plants were first made, we do not know by whom, they were told to watch and keep awake for 7 nights, just as young men now fast and keep awake when they pray for their medicine. They tried to do this, and nearly all were awake through the first night. But the next night, several dropped off to sleep. And the third night, others were asleep, and then others, until on the 7th night of the animals, only the owl, the panther, and 1 or 2 others were still awake. To these were given the power to see and to go about in the dark, and to make prey of birds and animals which must sleep at night. Of the trees, only the cedar and the pine, the holly and the laurel were awake to the end, and to them it was given to be always green and to be the greenest for medicine. But it was the others, it was said, because you have not endured till the end, you shall lose your hair every winter. And so that's another part of the creation tale of the Cherokee people. Now, while the very first Americans have been gone for thousands of years, hence we can't learn directly from them, the stories that are handed down from generation to generation can give us clues about the people who are here today. Perhaps we can learn about beliefs that go back many generations, beliefs and ways of seeing the world that may be very different from our own. The hope would be that we listen and respect these ways of seeing the world. Native Americans have had thousands of years of collective experience in living in the land we call home. We might just have some very valuable things to learn from all their experience. Now, the video which started our last episode was about the early Americans who came over the land bridge from Asia to populate America. It was believed that the Clovis culture was the first to populate the American continents. Let's watch this video as yet another story. It's all about the Clovis culture, but the emphasis is on what happened to them.
Anthropologists and archaeologists have long been trying to figure out what happened to these first people in the New World. The University of Wyoming's Associate Professor of Archaeology, Todd Surovell, joined me earlier to explain what we know and what we don't know about the Clovis people. So Todd, your specialty is the first people of the New World.
That's right, and I'm not talking about Christopher Columbus and the first Europeans, but the people who were here when Christopher Columbus arrived, people who arrived from Asia roughly 14 to 15,000 years ago, the Native Americans that we know of today, their ancestors.
Can you describe what their lives were like and what the world looked like to them?
Yeah, when people first arrived on this continent, it was a very different place. The world was in the midst of an ice age. We had massive, mile-thick glaciers or ice sheets covering much of the northern half of North America. The area of Wyoming today would have been considerably colder and drier. It probably would have been a tundra or treeless. We would have had mammoths, extinct elephants here. We would have had horses and camels and ground sloths, a huge array of extinct animals that don't live here anymore, even musk oxen and caribou. This was the environment into which people first entered. These people were not farmers. They were hunting and gathering peoples, and they were highly nomadic. They were moving hundreds of kilometers every year. We know this because we can look at the types of stone that they make their tools out of, and we know where that stone occurs naturally, and we know how far it has been moved. And we see people are moving a lot. They're highly nomadic. They're hunting and gathering and exploiting these large, now extinct prey species.
Reading some popular material, I came across the whole exaggerated idea that, oh, these people suddenly appeared and then they disappeared. But that's not necessarily the truth, is it?
Well, no, it's not. They certainly suddenly appeared in the sense that 16,000 years ago there were no people on this continent. And they arrived, we're almost certain they arrived from Asia, and probably first came into the northwestern part of Alaska. They came across the Bering Land Bridge, and from there their populations grew and they spread out and migrated across the continent, both North and South America. So in a sense it was a fairly sudden event, but in terms of their disappearance, no, they never disappeared. In fact, we consider them to be ancestral of the modern peoples who live here today. The notion that they disappeared is based on the fact that about 12,900 years ago, they changed the way that they made spear points from what we called a Clovis point to what we call a Folsom point. These refer to places where these types of artifacts were first found. They're very similar in appearance, but it's a slightly different style. And when you see a change in artifact style, you can interpret this in various ways, such as the extinction of the people who made the prior type of artifact. But really, probably what it just represents is changing fashion, changing style. People just changed the way they were doing things. One reason they may have done this is right at this time that they start, that they change the way they make projectile points, we have a massive extinction event. All these large mammals that used to live here in Wyoming suffered extinction. Something like 35 species of North American mammals suffered extinction right at this time period.
What caused that?
Well, it's a good question. We've been debating this for over 100 years now. The primary culprits, the traditional things we debate about, are the humans caused it. These animals had been living in North America for hundreds of thousands of years prior to human arrival. Humans show up, and within a couple thousand years, they're gone. So it's tempting to see some kind of causal event there, right?
Like
humans did it.
Guys got excited and killed as many as they could.
Absolutely. We call this the overkill idea. People as predators hunting too many animals, driving them to extinction. If you think about it, we've all been to Yellowstone National Park, or most of us have. The animals there, they don't experience human predation. They're totally naive to it, right? You can walk right up to them. And you could stick a spear in them if the Park Service would permit it, right? Imagine people first showing up here 13,000 years ago. These animals have never experienced human predation. They would have been naive to human predation. And the same idea pertains. Would it have been easy hunting? Would that have inspired people to essentially drive these animals to extinction? Another idea that we have is that climate change caused it. This was a period of dramatic climate change. We went from the last glaciation, when we had these huge ice sheets covering North America, to interglacial climate like today. So the Earth is warming dramatically. These glaciers are receding and melting back to the north and up mountain valleys. The sea level is rising. Plants and animals are migrating generally to the north, but in many different directions as we have this massive climatic and ecological shift. You can imagine climate change can cause animal extinctions because it's so ecologically disruptive. So this is another idea. A third idea that's been proposed is that it was disease that caused it. Humans brought with them diseases to which these animals had never experienced because humans were an old world species introduced into the new world. And perhaps through transmission of these diseases from themselves or possibly their domesticated dogs to these large mammals, the mammals are driven to extinction. And most recently, the most recent idea proposed is that an extraterrestrial body, either an asteroid or a comet, struck the Earth, perhaps the North American ice sheets, around 12,900, 13,000 years ago, and that this produced a massive shock wave causing fires and animal extinctions as well.
But research that you've done recently does not support that theory.
That's right. We spent the last 18 months, myself and 3 students at the University of Wyoming, Eileen Hillman, Joe Gingrich, and Carolyn Ketchum, and a number of colleagues from elsewhere, examining evidence for this comet impact from 7 sites across North America. And in fact, we found zero evidence whatsoever that this event actually happened. So at the moment, I have to be fairly skeptical about the comet hypothesis, but the remaining ideas I would consider still in play, and to a lesser extent the comet idea as well, because I don't think our work was necessarily the last word on that idea.
What does your gut tell you most likely happened?
My gut tells me that the most likely culprit is humans, for many reasons, but the simplest reason I can put forward is that this extinction event that correlates with human arrival in the New World was not unique to North America. It also happened in South America around the same time. It happened in Australia 50,000 years ago when people first showed up. It happened in various island chains like the Caribbean. 4,000 years ago it happened in the Mediterranean islands, Sicily and Sardinia and Crete. 12,000 years ago it happened in the islands of the Pacific. It happened in New Zealand with the moas, these large extinct birds, about 700 years ago. Everywhere people show up, we have this wave of large animal extinctions that follows. If we look at the New World, it seems like a really complex problem if we focus on that, because there's so much going on at this time period. But if we look at the world as a whole, the New World seems to fit this pattern. People show up, animals go extinct. In that sense, I see humans. My hunch is that humans must have played an important role in this process.
Dr. Todd Surovell, thanks for letting us pick your brain today.
Thanks for having me.
This is a good time to check with your level of understanding. This is the second video in which we learned about Clovis people, as well as the extinction of the large animals they hunted for food. Now, do you think that the first video you saw helped you understand this one more? Well, there were no visual clues in the video we just saw, no immediate context, so you may have understood less. There's no right or wrong about it. We're just taking a quick assessment of listening comprehension. We'll learn a lot more about the unit theme of Native Americans in episode 82. In our last episode, we looked at action words that told of actions and events in the past. They also communicate states of being. These are called past tense verbs. Now, the rule for showing events in the past is to add a D or an ED to the end of a present tense verb. Here are some examples. Humans arrived in America from Asia. They crossed the land bridge. They hunted megafauna like mammoths and mastodons. They adapted to changes in environment. Some verbs show the past in a different way. These are called irregular verbs. Here are some examples. Much of Earth's water froze into ice. Early Americans found areas where they could survive. They became skilled at making weapons. Some went to areas that were warmer. They made spear points. Ocean levels rose later. Now, these regular and irregular verbs are both considered the past simple, we say, simple past tense. They do a great job of communicating events and actions that took place in the past. But what about events and actions that happen before another event or action in the past? For this, we need some help. Specifically, we need to use some helping verbs, also called auxiliary verbs. When an event happened in the past and is no longer happening, we need to use the helping verb had. In that event, if that event happened in the past and is still taking place, then we use the helping verb have or has. Had and have, these are the verbs that help other verbs that show events or actions. Now let's look at some of those actions from the past. Here are two events. People from Asia crossed the land bridge into America. Ocean levels rose to flood the land bridge. These events happened at different times, but they both happened in the past, and they both stopped happening. So we're going to see, or actually we're going to use the helping verb had to communicate this. People from Asia had crossed the land bridge before ocean levels rose to flood the land bridge. We could have composed the sentence without the word had, but using that helping verb added to the emphasis, this is called the past perfect tense. In this case, it makes it clear that crossing the land bridge stopped once the bridge was flooded. The past perfect tense requires both the helping verb and the verb's participle. The verb's what? Okay, the participle is a verb form that must have a helping verb. Now this is getting pretty muddy. Let's look at a way that helps clarify all this. This chart shows the forms of verbs. The first column, or the first row I should say, is the present tense. In this case, the verb cross. Let me redo here we go. Okay, cross, the middle column, and that's in the present. Okay, crossed is the past tense, and cross, the last column, shows the participle, which in this case is crossed. So we use the participle crossed with the helping verb had to write had crossed. Simple, right? Oh, but hold it. The participle is not always going to be the same as the simple past. Let's consider the ocean level and what happened to it. The word rise is a present tense verb. Since rise is an irregular verb, the past tense is rose. The participle is not rose, it's risen. Remember, you can't use the participle by itself. Add the helping verb had, and you have the past perfect verb had risen. Whew. So, we could communicate that the ocean level had risen, causing the land bridge to flood. Let's practice using the past perfect tense with some simple and sample sentences. Some early Americans had returned to Asia before the land bridge flooded. Ice had covered much of the North American continent at that time. Some early Americans had gone to warmer areas of the continent. The Clovis point had become widespread throughout North America. Now let's use the past perfect tense to do what it does best. Communicate action in the past that happened before other action in the past. Early Americans had hunted woolly mammoths until those animals became extinct. Megafauna had lived in many areas of the continent before the climate change. Most of North America had been under a sheet of ice until the climate warmed up. The Clovis point had become the most widely used in the Southwest until the Folsom culture adopted a different spear point. Notice that each of these sentences uses a helping verb and a participle. Had hunted, had lived, had been, had become. We use these to show an action in the past in relation to another action in the past. And that, my friends, is what the past perfect tense does well. We'll use the past perfect tense of verbs again as we uncover the history of America's first people. As you learn English comprehension, you'll recognize when verbs are in the right form and when they're not. Meanwhile, there are charts to help you learn the forms of verbs, including their participles. I'll have a chart, in fact, posted on my website, letscreate.org. From the home page, click on Native American Unit, then navigate to the episode 81 page. You know, I love to hear from viewers, and you can send me an email at letscreatepro@gmail.com. Be sure to visit my website, letscreate.org, to see the support materials for this episode, including that list of irregular verbs. I talked about earlier that list, and it'll be there. So click on the link to the Native American Unit and navigate to the episode 81 page. You can watch and even download this episode and more from archive.org/details/roguetv. All episodes are there. Enter Ramping Up Your English in the search box and choose the episode you want. Ramping Up Your English can be seen on RVTV in Ashland on Channel 15 and 115 on the Ashland Home Network, and on Charter 182 in the rest of Southern Oregon on Charter Cable. You can stream Ramping Up Your English for free from rvtv.sou.edu. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, and my talented and dedicated crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you help make this program an award winner. Join me next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roadtv. Join us next time on RVTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.